The time has finally come for Marvel Studios' What If, the brand new MCU Disney Plus series, the first animated MCU Disney Plus series, and man, this was so fun. Captain Carter is so cool, and just the whole format of the show, I really enjoy it because, you know, it's definitely not on the level of, like, you know, something like Loki or WandaVision, The Falcon Winter Soldier, where it really gets you talking every week about, like, oh, what's going to happen next, because there are self-contained stories, but we do know that later on, as we go on through the series, that we are going to be getting more connected, and then we'll have ties to Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, creating the Guardians of the Multiverse, as we've seen in promo art and stuff. So, but for now, it's pretty much just self-contained stories, which I actually really like, because then that really gives a good opportunity to really in-depth explore each of these various what-if scenarios, and I think that's really cool. And the whole format of doing about half-hour episodes, I think, is really cool as well, because they could totally do 40-minute episodes, but I actually like that they do the half-hour episodes, because, you know, like, that's what you would usually get with, like, your regular cartoon animated series on TV. So I like that they kind of replicate that feel here. But also, you know, they do a full story here, because that was, like, back when we had WandaVision and we had episodes that were only like a half hour each. We were upset with that, and we're like, oh, it's not enough and all that stuff. But with this being a half hour, it works, because you have a full story go all the way around in one episode. So, like, you're fully fed until next week's episode. And I think that's awesome. I think that's really, really cool that we get to see that. And this was a great episode. I really did enjoy it. The action, the music was amazing. And just getting the introduction to the character of Captain Carter was really, really cool. And we are going to go ahead and start getting into spoilers now. So if you haven't seen the episode yet, then spoiler warning, because we do have a few different things here that we definitely need to talk about here. So let's go ahead and get into this. So we start off with an introduction to the Watcher, Jeffrey Wright voicing the Watcher, and he makes it very clear, especially at the end of the episode, that he is the Watcher. This is his whole thing. He watches everything and watches all these various multiversal what-if scenarios play out, and he, no matter what, he cannot and will not interfere. So it's pretty much just his job to watch, but he can't actually do anything, even if bad stuff is really happening. So he is our narrator for this series. He doesn't really say too much in this episode. For the most part, it's just the beginning and again at the end. But it's still cool to see that his presence is known in this series. So we start off Earth, June 1943, where we basically recreate in this whole episode the events of Captain America: The First Avenger. That's honestly one of my favorite MCU movies, from probably my favorite from Phase 1, maybe after Avengers. But yeah, I'm really a big fan of Captain America: The First Avenger, so I enjoyed seeing it from a different perspective here, where, you know, usually Peggy would go up in the booth and watch from a distance, but this time she was like, no, I think I'll be more comfortable down here. So, of course, things go wrong. That Hydra sleeper agent, he starts shooting people. He shoots Steve, so Steve is then not able to get the super soldier serum. So they're like, all right, who's going to do it? And Peggy volunteers. So Peggy Carter decides to take the super soldier serum. And then, of course, after that, bunch of people there working at the military and everything are like, oh, she's just a girl, she's fragile and all this stuff. She proves she is not fragile, because Howard actually gives her the suit and the shield to officially become Captain Carter. And then she goes out on some various missions. And that was one gripe that I do have with this episode, is the pacing, because, you know, a lot happened in this episode. And because it was a half hour, there was a lot of montage style stuff, which I did enjoy. And again, you had some of that kind of like classic 50s style music in there, which fit in really nicely. But also, you know, it was a lot to fit into a half hour. But I still enjoyed what we got. So we see things like her capturing Arnim Zola and retrieving the Tesseract. And she also rescued the 107th. And then, of course, Steve, as we saw in the trailers, because he didn't get the super soldier serum, he is still able to go into battle, because he suits up as the very first Iron Man in this Hydra Stomper suit that was created by Howard Stark. So that was definitely really cool. But then he dies on that same mission where in the actual movie, that is where Bucky dies, or supposedly dies, as, you know, later he comes back to life, and turns out he didn't die. Well, basically the same exact thing happens here, because Steve, supposedly his Hydra Stomper blows up. And then, you know, everybody's dealing with grief, and you're like, oh no, he's gone, and all this stuff. And then later, we enter our final battle where the Red Skull summons the champion of Hydra. And throughout this whole episode, he was like, oh yeah, I'm summoning the champion of Hydra, and it's a creature from the stars. And we're like, what is this creature going to be? And you don't really see it fully, but you see these giant green tentacles, like some sort of multiversal green octopus squid type thing. And I guarantee that this is Shuma-Gorath. Shuma-Gorath, of course, in the comics I've talked about multiple times on my channel before, is basically this giant green squid who lives out in the multiverse. He's a multiversal villain and just wants to conquer the multiverse. He's got one giant eyeball, very similar to like Starro the Conqueror, who we just saw in the Suicide Squad, but green and with a bunch of tentacles. So he's actually been rumored to be the villain of Doctor Strange 2 in the Multiverse of Madness. So this could be a tie between this series and that movie. And again, we don't really fully see Shuma-Gorath, so we don't know for sure if that's who it is, but we kind of have to assume. But during this battle, of course, the Red Skull dies pretty quickly. But turns out Steve is actually still alive, and because his suit truly is indestructible. So that was pretty cool there. But Peggy, just like Steve in Captain America: The First Avenger, has to make the sacrifice. So she has to push the creature back into the portal and, of course, go along with it. And then the episode ends with her hopping out of the portal, but now over 70 or like almost 70 years later, in like 2011, 2012-ish, right before the events of the first Avengers movie, right in front of Nick Fury and Hawkeye. So yeah, that was crazy, and honestly kind of makes me wish that we could like explore more with this character. We're like, oh, what's gonna happen then? Because, you know, that's not really something I thought about. Like, just this one subtle change of Peggy Carter becoming Captain Carter changes so much in the timeline. It really does. And then the death of the Red Skull, that means you never get him as the Stonekeeper, and there's just so much that happens in this episode that would change so much in the future of the MCU timeline. And I think that's just really such a cool idea, because, you know, I knew it would impact things, but I didn't really think about that. Like, yeah, when she comes back, she's going to be an Avenger. Wow, there's some crazy stuff here. It was a great episode. I really enjoyed it. Another thing I forgot to mention at the beginning of the video is, of course, returning voice actors. You've got Haley Atwell back starring as Peggy Carter. That was amazing. Also, Dominic Cooper as Howard Stark, and Sebastian Stan as Bucky Barnes, Neil McDonough as Dum Dum Dugan. That was all really cool. We did have a different actor for Steve Rogers, so it was a little weird not hearing Chris Evans' voice, so it didn't really fully feel like Steve Rogers. But I believe it was actually Josh Keaton doing the voice, who voiced Spider-Man in the Spectacular Spider-Man, one of probably my favorite animated series ever. So that was still pretty cool though, either way. And yeah, it was just a fun episode, and I'm really excited to see where we go from here. I think the next episode is supposed to be the Chadwick Boseman episode where T'Challa becomes Star-Lord. I'm really excited for that. But guys, what if? It is a crazy question that you didn't know could mean so much to reality and the multiverse. Things are going to get crazy, and I'm so excited to see how things go down in the future. Of course, we got 9 episodes in this series, and I'm so excited for each and every single one of them. But guys, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think about Marvel Studios' What If Episode 1? What if Captain Carter were the first Avenger? And of course, all your theories for the other episodes we're getting in Season 1. But anyways, thanks so much for watching. Please drop a like if you enjoyed this video, and hit the subscribe button so I can keep up to date on everything that goes on in the Marvel life.